Hello everyone, and welcome back to Wander Freely. We still have a couple of our 1 year anniversary videos that we'd like to share with you to give you some more information about what we've learned in our first year of full-time RVing, having been people who had never spent a single night in an RV. So we think this information is valuable. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the transitions that we found happening in our lives as we changed from people in a typical home with typical jobs to living on the road. To start out, let's talk about some of the smaller items that are part of your daily life that maybe you take for granted but will change, and you will have a transition if you make the move to live on the road. The first one is exercise, and exercise is important, obviously. I think exercise has been a harder transition for Chris than it has been for me. He really enjoyed going to a gym. So he had a Planet Fitness membership, and he was happy with that. He could go whenever he wanted. He just liked that kind of routine and stability, whereas I hate gyms and would rather never step in one again, to be quite honest. So it wasn't as big of a deal for me. Now, while we do get more exercise in our daily lives because we're out and about more and we're spending a lot more time outside, at the same time, those workouts, Chris has found that especially the things that he likes to do, he has not been able to do those as much. So we did purchase bands to use to work out, and we do like those. They have worked pretty well for us, but again, that's something Chris misses, is being able to go to a regular gym. Diet is the second one, and this was probably the biggest challenge for us because I have an autoimmune disease, and because of that I have a very restricted diet. Chris also has a restricted diet because I am his cook, so which he doesn't mind. Actually, we both found that we enjoy it much better anyway, but that transition was scary for us. We were afraid, what if we can't get the food that we need? How is this going to look on the road? And the truth is, at some point we just decided, you know what, we just have to do it and learn as we go, and sure enough, that's what we've done. So don't allow that to intimidate you if you do have diet restrictions. I was actually surprised. I never shopped at Walmart for groceries before. We didn't have one near us, so it wasn't even really an option anyway, but I did a lot of local shopping at the farms and things. I'd actually buy direct from farms, so that has definitely changed because I don't have those kind of opportunities like I did before, and I don't have those relationships either, which is sad. I miss that. Also, we have a much smaller fridge and freezer, so I'm not able to stock up. Like, I used to have a big chest freezer, and when it was butchering time, I would stock up on meat, and I'm not doing that now. I just don't have the room for it. So I do the best that I can, and I am surprised, you can count on being able to find a Walmart, and it is surprising how much Walmart actually has. Since I had not shopped at one, I was really surprised at how much they have. I mean, that's considered healthier. So things like, they have wild-caught tuna, they have organic vegetables. It might not be the same selection that I have back in Pennsylvania, but still it's enough that we're able to get through and continue traveling. So don't allow that to intimidate you or keep you from getting on the road. Third, and another thing that you may kind of take for granted on a day-to-day basis, is the weather. Now, we come from Pennsylvania. We have all 4 seasons, and it's pretty predictable when you're in each season what the weather is going to be like for the most part. And then we get to other places in the country, and we realize that within hours in the same day, the weather is completely opposite of what it was. So it's kind of interesting, and it's a lot of fun, actually, to be able to experience these things for yourself and really learn through the experience, as opposed to maybe hearing about it or just reading about it. And so this is actually kind of a fun thing, but keep in mind that you will be layering a lot as you go, and there are certain things that you'll need to keep in your wardrobe so that you can be able to accommodate for those kind of changes in the weather that are more extreme maybe than where you're used to living. Here's another transition that's kind of a funny one, but the responsibilities and chores that you have as an individual and as a couple, ours were very delineated before because we had jobs and there was a certain amount of time we wanted to leave for chores, and that was it. We didn't want to spend our whole weekend doing them, so obviously we had kind of a divide, and Chris took care of this stuff and I took care of that stuff. And what we found with our life on the road is that a lot of these things have become much more fluid. For example, most of the time that we go grocery shopping, we do it together now, and we never did that before. That was something that I always did by myself. But now we usually do it on our way home from something. Either we went out for a hike, or we went into town to see what the town looks like, or whatever it is. We're usually stopping at the grocery store on our way from something else. And because of that, he ends up coming with me a lot. So it's those kind of chores and duties, and same with cleaning, those kind of things. They've become a lot more fluid and less delineated for us. So in talking about our chores, another transition you will make is just in your marriage in general. So all of a sudden you go from having different duties and different, hats that you're wearing, and then all of a sudden you're together all the time. So for me, that actually works out great. Chris would, if he was with me for this video, he would be laughing right now because he knows that that's what I would like anyway. But for him, it can be a little bit different. And so, but actually, he's really transitioned well to that. He's enjoyed it a lot. We had actually worked together at the same office. I kind of worked for Chris in some ways for the past, it was about 3 years. So we were already starting to spend a lot more time together than we had previously, which I think made the transition a lot easier for us. But keep that in mind, you will be spending a lot of time together. Also going along with chores is the utilities. Things like taking the trash out. Normally you would be, you'd have a strict day that you do that, and now it's just kind of nice because when your trash is full, you take it out. It's pretty easy. But your other utilities, things like that, they are a lot more, usually you're hard-lined to things, and once again, now it's a lot more fluid. So your water, your electric, all of those things are changing all the time, and so is your Wi-Fi. So that's a bit of a transition as well. Another part of our daily and even weekly routine was church. So we do believe we are Christ followers, and we were actually members of a church. Chris actually was a deacon at our church, and I worked at the church part-time in addition to my regular job to help out and do secretarial duties. So we were very involved with our church, and that was really hard to leave behind. The transition now is, in some ways, it's a lot of fun because we get to visit churches all over the country, and there have been places where we haven't been able to find a church to attend. And so in those cases, we usually just watch a sermon online, or which we do throughout the week anyway. So it's there are different ways to kind of meet your spiritual well-being needs, but make sure that you're consider that, because that is a transition that you'll need to make. Another part of your daily life that will change is how time affects you. So you go from having such a structured working life where you have set hours and then, set days of the week even. And then all of a sudden your time is your own. You're scheduling your own work, in Chris's case, and then you're scheduling what you do outside of work. And the beauty of this is that by scheduling your own work, you're actually allowed to focus so much more on the work that you're able to produce much more effectively. And because of that, we've found that it doesn't take Chris near as long to do things as it did before, where you had a more structured day had a lot of different things like meetings and phone calls and all different kinds of things that really kind of disrupt your time of focus. Now he has all that time to focus, so that makes a big difference. And also going along with that is the daylight hours. It's kind of funny, we actually decided not to set an alarm in the morning to wake us up, and because of that, what we found is, as we went from month to month and from state to state and through different time zones and all these things, we found that our bodies actually really grew accustomed to the sunlight. And so places where the sun was rising early, we were getting up early. Places where the sun was rising much later, we were getting up later. So time just has this completely different, I'm sure we could have a whole philosophical talk about this, but time has a completely different feel to it when you make a transition into full-time RVing. Another big change for us, and it's a much more serious change, is actually our income. So Chris had a salary before that we could count on, and he has now moved to more of an hourly wage. And so that transition felt very strange for us because we are in our mid-30s. We've both been working for, a few years now, and since we got out of college, and so that was, kind of felt like we were going back to high school and getting this, you work so many hours and this is what you get and that's it. There is no salary anymore. So that was a big transition, but one of the things that I found that I really appreciate about that is how much it has taught me the value of things. Now I look at something and I say, okay, this costs such and such. That's so many hours of Chris working. Is that really worth it? Or whatever it is. It really has redefined how we view money and our income in general, and has really allowed us to appreciate the time that we do work and making sure that we're effective in those hours to accomplish the goals that we want to. So that has actually been a real blessing for us. And going along with having the money to purchase things is the transition of space that you have. So obviously you're going to be living in a much smaller space. Even if you buy a much larger RV than ours, you're still going to be living in a much smaller space. And the beauty of that when it comes to purchasing things, ladies, is that I find now that if I want to purchase something, I have to think about where am I going to put it. And usually that means there's something that must go in order for me to accommodate that new item. And so it really helps you to think about all those extra things that you might want to purchase that maybe aren't really, maybe aren't something that you need, or something that you're willing to give up other things for. So it's something to think about, really. And going along with the small space, not just things that you purchase, but just adjusting to a smaller space. Actually, Chris and I have done pretty well with that. Although the first 2 weeks, I would say, and I've mentioned it before, Chris kept bumping his head, and I did too. His was his head all the time. I was bumping random things, but he kept bumping his head on everything. I don't know what it was. But then his body just adjusted, it made the transition, and he hasn't bumped his head since. So there are space constraints there, and it is different, and yet at the same time, while you're living in a smaller space, you actually feel like you're living in the whole world, because you're traveling and moving all the time. So your backyard is different every couple of days. So there's this expanse in contrast to the smaller space. So it's kind of an interesting transition. And going along with that is your physical location is always changing. So you go from being a part of a community, and we were a big part of our community, and that was really, really hard. This was one of the harder transitions for us, and one that we still, struggle with from time to time, and I'm sure that we will go back to at some time. But we loved our community, and we loved being a part of the community. So it is more difficult for us to be on the road. Although there is a sense of camaraderie with other RVers and at a park, you're still not really a big part of a community, if that makes sense, where you're able to help out with things and volunteer and be active. You have some of those opportunities, but it's not the same, as we did before. So that's kind of a transition as well. And probably one of the biggest transitions, and it kind of encompasses all the other things, is change itself. You're going to go from not having a whole lot of change in your life, or at least what it seems like, to everything changing around you at all times. And so that is a big transition to make, and I think it's one of the things that maybe keeps a lot of people from trying RVing, or from trying to make the big changes and the sacrifices needed to get on the road. Change can be difficult, but the truth is that change comes no matter what. And finding a way to really embrace that change is important for everyone, and you really get a sense of freedom once you do. And so life on the road becomes a very, very kind of, I don't like the word liberating, but liberating experience. And you can start to feel the freedom of being able to just allow changes to come and go, and you're there embracing them and enjoying them for what they are. That wraps up our list of transitions that we came up with, that we found were the biggest transitions that we made in the course of a year on the road. We will be still talking about, we have our income and expenses, the costs of things coming up. That video is coming up, as well as one on the repairs and what we had to do to stay on the road, just so that you have an idea of what that looks like as well. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.